Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Campbell Steedman. I'm a partner with the international law firm Squire Patton Boggs here in Dubai. But more importantly, I'm delighted to welcome three very important and impressive panelists to our session on equality in the energy sector. We heard this morning in the first plenary sessions about the role of equality for women in business with the global diversity and sustainability goals, and within that, energy and clean energy is one of the most important goals also. So I'm delighted to welcome to my immediate left Khawla Al-Mahari, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Government Communications with DEWA. To her left, Valerie Levkov, Senior Vice President for Africa, Middle East and the Mediterranean at Électricité de France, EDF. And at the far end, Lamia Faraz, Executive Director of Brand and Strategic Initiatives at Masdar here in the UAE. So without further ado, I'd like to go straight to some of the key issues in the energy sector, and I suppose, Khawla, if I may start with you. Why do you think there has been a traditional lack of equality in the energy sector? So
hello everybody, I am really pleased to be here. We are as a family between I'm used to work with DEWA and Masdar, and I feel a bit like a mother for these two young and smart ladies, and I'm very proud to have such daughters. Even if myself, I have two daughters and a son. I have spent all my career in EDF, which is a low carbon electricity champion worldwide, and I spent 30 years in this career. So I've seen the long evolution of women in the energy sector. When I started my job after my engineering school, in the engineering school we were 7% student. If I look after 30 years, how many women are still in the technical fields? Almost zero, because one of the key issues we are lacking of young engineers, recruits in the technical fields coming from the schools. Nowadays in France we have 30%. Around 30% of young women doing their education in the technical fields. So we are lacking from recruitment. And then a lot of women start engineering activities or technical activities and left. They left for financial, communication, HR, motherhood, whatever. So that is one of our key challenges, to have young women coming to these energy sector activities. And as Khawla said, with the transition towards more renewable, we can see more and more young women coming in this field. Last month I had a lecture in Sharjah University here for the Bachelor of Renewable Energy, and 70% of the students are young women. 70%. So I was amazed and really excited to see all those women coming in the sector. So now for the future, of course, I am more and more confident that this sector will have more and more balanced gender recruitment, and then it is more about the leadership and the career. So we have to encourage everybody, in the female especially, to be ambitious. Ambition is not a bad word. And I have seen during all my career that usually for women, being ambitious is not a good behavior. On the male part, it's the reverse. Let's be ambitious. Let's be proud of what we can do and what we can bring to the high technical sector. Well, I am in charge also of Africa. Khawla said it. In Africa, 640 million people don't have access to electricity. Women know what it is about getting electricity and getting carbon-free electricity. So in Africa, we can see also more and more women coming to the electricity sector because they want for themselves and for their children and for their daughter having more and more cheap, available, sustainable electricity. So that's why I'm quite confident that this sector will have a better gender balance in the near future.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting, Carla mentioned in the opening session the ambition and the need to have that confidence and to state it. Lamia, from Masdar's perspective, obviously looking very much at renewables, clean energy, very modern energy in that sense. Are you seeing the same challenges from women in the industry as we've had traditionally?
First of all, good morning. I'm very happy to be here and to have such a great audience to hear about the changes in the energy sector. To be honest, with the renewable energy sector, it's quite different. There's a report that was recently launched by the International Renewable Energy Agency that showed that actually renewable energy sector has 33% women compared to the 22% in traditional energy. And there's quite a few reasons for that. One mainly is that women prefer or follow careers in areas that are more meaningful to them. And the fact that renewable energy has impact on society as a whole. It is bringing betterment to communities locally, internationally. So that's one of the aspects why more women are entering into that sector and in sustainability in general. Also, there is better access to education, better access to opportunities. Since the launch of the International Renewable Energy Agency 10 years ago, there has been about $10 trillion invested in renewable energy, which has provided more jobs, more opportunities, and more interest. The UAE is also unique in terms of the empowerment of women. I think we touched on that earlier, that the leadership since the days of our founding father, Sheikh Zayed, have always been pushing for the education of women, for the participation of women in any sector, wherever they feel relevant. So I think that opportunity is bigger and more and provided here in the UAE. And with that, you can see these outcomes in the education. So 70% of university graduates in the UAE are female. Over 50% are actually in the STEM sector. So even for us in Masdar, when we get applications for roles in the renewable energy sector, as Masdar is a renewable energy company, many of them are women and they're interested. Plus, in our organization, we have many development programs to support if there is a possible gap between where they've come from, the education they have, and entering into the sector. We have an emerging leaders program that helps or provides women with training, activities within the organization for them to become leaders in the sector. And 55% of our employees in that program are female. We have a mentorship program, because again, I think role modeling is one of the most important aspects of encouraging women to enter in these non-traditional sectors. In that program at Masdar, 80% are female as well. We also have some strategic platforms that include young females from across the UAE and globally. We have the Women in Sustainability, Environment and Renewable Energy platform. We launched this 5 years ago on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meeting, and it's basically a platform to inspire and encourage women to be leaders in the sustainability sector as a whole. It not only encourages them to be in that sector, but also provides them with the skills required to be able to succeed in that sector. So I think there's a lot of optimism in including women in the renewable energy sector, in the clean energy sector, and their participation is important. As we said, 50% I think of the global community are women, and so having both men and women be part of these sectors is just as important.
Thank you. I think you've addressed actually a number of the points I was going to raise, in the next question, but I think, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this, Khawla, as well. I think you've both raised the point on mentorship and also the leadership in the UAE from Sheikh Zayed onwards. And I suppose one of the questions would be, how well represented are women in in DIWA? And what do you see the challenges going forward? And the third bit of that, when you look at mentorship, is it, and with the example we've taken from the UAE, is it women in leadership who are the good mentors, or is it important to have sort of male mentors within that as well? I think that's one of the areas that with the evolving business community, I think sometimes we don't find the right balance in that respect. So, Khala, your thoughts on those 3 points that I made?
Well, Campbell, I'd like to start with the last question first, because that's very interesting. I believe many people, when we talk about gender equality or inequality, they talk about the numbers. We're not really competing here with men. Let me reiterate this very important fact. What we need here is more of striking balance whereby women could actually have equal rights, because when you talk about sustainable development, we're not only talking about the energy sector, but we're talking about having equal opportunities, having access to education system, to healthcare services, to actually have also a fair representation across the board and not the energy sector as such. But in general, the sector, as you rightly said, worldwide has suffered from women representation on the board. For instance, I came across a very important figure in one of the reports where they said that worldwide the women representation on the board in the energy sector is only 5%, whereas in some other parts of the world it's 14 to 16% in management roles, according to Ernst & Young report that was issued in 2016. Now this has changed completely with the UAE. If you look at the UAE, I came also through a very important figure which was mentioned in one of the reports, stating that the UAE has the highest number of female graduates in engineering, which is actually 50% compared to almost 20% in engineering field in some of the developed countries like Finland, Germany, Canada, and the United States. And this is a bright spot to highlight here. Going back to what my colleague from Masdar has just mentioned when she said that we've got really many graduates, women graduates in STEM fields, and this is really inspiring for many of us. Now, going back to the women representation in DIWA, I'm really proud to say that I believe the place speaks for itself. You could see many women with inspiring stories here around us only sitting. One of them is the chief legal advisor, who's just sitting on my right. She's Fatma Al-Joker, and she's also heading the women's committee. We've got the an engineer sitting right there, a very proud mom, and a colleague of mine who happens to be the Vice President of Marketing and Communications. She's been leading great initiatives for community outreach and conservation, saving Dubai cumulatively more than 1.2 billion dirhams worth of electricity and water. If that is not called the power of influence, what else we can call? So we have a fair representation of women across the whole board. I used to be greeted with surprise in 2009 when I used to say that I work for Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, but this has changed. Now people seek to see more women participating in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie, your thoughts from EDF's perspective on those challenges and how you see it?
So EDF's perspective is slightly different because EDF is a very old company. We are we are 160,000 people worldwide, mainly engineer, male-driven company for the last century. Nowadays, things are moving, of course, and moving faster and faster. Last week, our chairman and CEO just appointed a woman as a chairman and president of the distribution network activity, which is a 35,000 people activity, key for our business. So it's a core business activity led now by a woman. In the executive committee, committee of the group, which is 12 people, like a board, we have now 3 women. So 3 and 12, it's growing, and on the top 200 managing director, as I am, we are maybe between 30 and 40. So there is a willingness of our chairman and CEO to make to give the equal chance. As we said, it's not to have better rights, it's just to have our chance. And nowadays, in each position, we have to assess both male and women candidates. And if there is a woman candidate which is at the best level compared to men, she will be chosen. So there is a real willingness to make the position for women being higher and higher in number. In quality, that's not the problem. We have high quality women. It's more number that is still lacking, but it is growing really fast. The key difficulty is not, in fact, for the leadership. It's more for middle intermediate positions where we have a lack of women. So if we want to seed the managing director positions, we need to push women from down to top at the early stage. And the main difference I can see between old Europe companies and here in the Middle East fast-growing companies is to see how young leaders are in your country, ladies, and how young you are in your position. That is the next step for us. And last week, the new executive committee member for all the international affairs has been appointed as a woman of 46 years old, so much younger than all the others at the same level. So it is another equality and mixity and diversity push we have in EDF. So women empowerment and young leaders empowerment, which is also key for the energy transition we are moving. We cannot afford anymore to be an oil-driven company because this energy sector is fast moving. So it is another trend we have.
Thank you. No, interesting. Lamia, what are the key challenges then in this area for Masdar now? What do you see in the next 10 years for the challenges that you're going to be facing to take even more women into the industry?
I think as Masdar and the UAE, we have all the ingredients already set on their way, from the government's support, from seeing role models all across UAE, to actually be able to just improve year on year on our gender parity goals, ensuring that more women are involved in the sector. I think we were just talking about youth, and we know that globally more than 50% of the population are youth today, and they are going to be the future that drives all these different sectors, specifically in sustainability and the next 10 decades of action to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the more programs, at least from our perspective in Masdar, we are introducing programs, development programs, support programs to include youth and young women in the sector. A big aspect I think that's very important is seeing role models. And when I say role models, I think part of it is men supporting women, mentoring them as well, and ensuring that they have the opportunities, but also seeing women leaders in STEM sectors. I mean, for me, I've seen women in the UAE all around us. I mean, I can see Dr. Bahjat sitting here. She was the provost of Masdar Institute, so she was a leader that I looked up to. Dr. Amal Ghafri was also one of the first faculty engineers at Masdar Institute. And women in UAE are also not being leaders in the UAE, but they're also being recognized internationally. We have Dr. Nawal Hosseini, who is our permanent representative at IRENA. Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, who is the head of the Mohammed bin Zayed Conservation Fund, as well as the managing director of the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi, who's recently been nominated as one of the 2 leaders for the International Union for Conservation of Nature that's headquartered in Switzerland. And if she actually wins the presidency, she will be the first Arab woman to lead that organization in the 72 years of that organization being in place. So I think role modeling is very important, and in the UAE we do have really great women role models that we can look up to support more women to enter into those new sectors, ensure that women's participation is evident, is seen locally and globally, and actually the world can learn from the UAE as an example of such activities and inclusion of women.
Thank you, Lama. I think that's a very sort of positive note on which to end. I'd love to continue for some time, but we have the plenary session that we need to be ready for. I think it's been a fascinating conversation, thank you, and to see the example that the UAE sets and is setting in women in the energy sector, but in leadership generally. I hope that in time, perhaps as the world continues to globalize and internationalize, that maybe the region here can set the example for some of the more traditional industries in Europe and in other parts of the world in terms of engagement. But I'd just like to ask you all to join me in thanking our three guests today. I think it's been fascinating. We could spend a lot longer. We talked earlier about the interaction between government and private sector and things, and those again are examples which the UAE is setting the standard for. So I'd just like to thank each of you, Khawla, Valerie, Lamia, and look forward to seeing the development of each of the businesses in the years to come. Thank you very much.